It's nice to be here.
Yeah.
And I've told Rose that she can just interrupt me so we can have like a dialogue, and the same goes for everybody here. And if anybody who's live streaming wants to ask questions, please, we've got like about 45 minutes, so feel free to pause me and ask questions that you have. So,
well, why is offering a job not good enough nowadays?
well, let's get to that. It's because it's a really hot job market and opportunities are everywhere. And Christine did such a good job like illustrating that, you know, what once was hundreds of resumes for one position now is one position and sometimes no resumes. I just read this stat the other day that the unemployment rate is the lowest that it has been since 1976. Like it's just a completely different market now. And you said in the intro, you know, we were already talking about this pre-pandemic. It's more just that the pandemic accelerated a lot of the trends that we were already starting to see. And so here we are in 2022 going like, okay, well, what are we going to do about this? And the main thing is employers really need to energize the employment or the employee experience if they're going to have any success in retention, recruitment, and releasing well. I really liked that you added that one, Christine. And the challenge is we've been almost conditioned to only offer what we know to be true, what we received. It's hard to think that so much has changed in what people are wanting of every generation, not just the Zoomers and the millennials, but every generation is wanting something different. And so as employers, it's now up to us to figure out what an attractive employee experience would be like. If you can get that, or if even you can get halfway of that or part of that, you'll tend to be more successful in your recruitment and in your retention.
Interesting. And so interesting that you said every generation, because, you know, sometimes you think, oh, well, I've been in a workforce for quite some time. And so I kind of just will toe the line with what we've always had. But everybody's looking for something different. That happened pre-COVID. During COVID, what is one of the biggest things that you think has changed in people's wants?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I get what I love about the work I do, you know, you're like, oh, you do so many things. Like, yeah, what I love about the work that I do is I see so many perspectives. So I get to see what employers are saying about why people leave. I get to see what people who are thinking about leaving are saying because I coach them individually. I get to see what they're saying when they're out there looking for a new role and what they're seeing or not seeing. And honestly, it's almost like what's happened is, and I'm going to flip the slide because I think this will be helpful. It's almost like what's happened is we got used to having like the basics of what a job is, and the basics, if anybody has any psychology background in them, including Kelsey, Maslow's hierarchy of needs kind of fits quite closely to what we're seeing in the trends of what people really are needing. And so we've gone from sort of these basic things, which are our survival. So at the base level, you know, we need to be paid fairly, right? And when we're not paid fairly or we don't feel like we're being compensated for the job that we're doing, we tend to be pretty irate about it. And we can tend to see a lot of I see a lot of rage quitting over this particular piece. And it's because I see it as it's such a base survival need. We need our financials in order.
It absolutely is. So I have a question on that.
Yeah.
We live in a day and age where housing probably takes more of our budget than it ever has. And is that part of the challenge then, that it's not translating into wages that can support housing?
Yeah, that's a good question. And we could probably talk about compensation for like days.
Okay.
But yeah, that is true. And so depending on what market you're in, if you're not paying fairly in your market, then you're going to have challenges if your market has like skyrocketing housing costs. Now, there's some differences though. There's like cost of living considerations, and then there's cost of labor considerations, and those two things don't actually tie up neatly with a bow. My business partner, Annika, she's a compensation professional, and it's just a tizzy out there right now, everybody, because inflation's going up. So should we move base salaries up? Well, inflation's going to come down again. So what's going to happen there? So there's some things in there that a little bit more art, I guess, than science. But in general, yeah, when housing is a problem, then also wages tend to follow that. And along with that is our, again, like feeling safe in our work environment and in our home environment. And the second part of this is how we feel about our actual work style. So this is where, you know, our feeling of having like psychological safety with the people that we work with comes in. This is us feeling like we're not being threatened in our workplaces or, you know, in our life places. This is our ability to work autonomously. Have not yet met a person who does not want to work autonomously. It's a big reason why people end up leaving their jobs, because they feel like they're being overly or micromanaged. And another big reason is because they don't feel like they're getting the flexibility that they need. And Christine, you did a great job talking about like how you work together with your team to help them meet the needs of the life that they're having outside of work. But these are the basics. So if we, as employers, haven't gotten the basics down, it's hard to get up to these other three, which are the next three reasons why people leave, and tends to be the why it's not enough to just offer, you know, you've got wages and you have a safe working environment. Any thoughts or questions before I share these?
No, I'm interested in the next one, and then I'm pretty sure I'll have a comment. But.
Okay, that's good. Okay, so the next one up is really that community, that social belonging element. So this is where we feel included. This is where we feel like we belong. And I actually should pause and say, like, the work that I'm showing here it comes from the organizational psychologist Adam Grant. I don't know if you've all heard of him, some nods. If you haven't, great podcast called Work Life. He was just talking about the Great Resignation last week on his podcast. As I was preparing this, I think everybody should listen to that if you have a few extra minutes to spare. But him and a team of researchers in 2018, so pre-pandemic, went searching for why people aren't satisfied and why they leave their jobs or why they don't accept jobs. And the reasons that they found were these ones. It was about community. It was about the next one, career satisfaction. So like career development, feeling like they're truly engaged in their jobs, feeling like they can make movement or progression, like you're talking about your training program. So that feeling that we can professionally develop and develop skills. And then lastly, it's something higher than oneself. So cause and being purpose driven of something more than just profits, it turns out. And these things, it feels like people have had way more time to be thinking and reflecting on these, and these things have become so much more important to them that now, instead of them being nice add-ons, they've actually become part of the core offering.
Okay, a couple questions.
Yeah.
So community, we want to belong. Has COVID, by the same token, we want flexibility, so we want to be able to work from home. Mm-hmm. Does that challenge the sense of belonging?
That's a good question. I think yes and no. It depends on how companies are curating the hybrid or the remote experiences. I see lots of companies that are doing a fantastic job of helping people feel included. Included doesn't mean I see you face to face and we just happen to occupy the same place, because I could feel really excluded in that environment too. So I think it's all about how we communicate, how we actually build human relationships, like personal relationships with the people, how we actually care about each other, right? And how we make the diversity amongst us feel like it belongs. So even if that's like, it's a whole other topic to go off into the DEI space, but even if we're just talking about maybe like differences in how we spend our weekends, like, so some of us are spending them with kids, some of us are spending them mountain biking, like all these differences that we have, even being able to bring those in and actually caring about, what people care about, that can be highly effective. And you can do that remotely.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? We can have really great conversations now. And I think what you said, like, people have figured out how to use those tools. Yes, I know we're getting a little bit tired of them and things, but we know how to use them so we can use them well to build inclusion.
Okay, but here's another question. It's probably a tougher question. We all want to find meaning within our employment, and most of us are going to be employed in regular jobs. And so how can an employer facilitate the ability to offer that meaning in just regular jobs?
Yeah, I'm gonna stop my slides now because we're gonna go all over.
Yeah.
So I'll just leave this up and we can just chat through it, because I bet you're gonna ask me other questions.
Okay,
I did tell Rose to provoke me, so this is great. So I think it's interesting because I think a lot of employers will get, they will get kind of confused or concerned about how they can offer something that's something outside themselves, and everyone tends to think like it has to have something to do with the business. It's got to be like directly related to what the business does. I think what's actually more important is entrepreneurs and the core teams that they have really sitting down and thinking through like, what is the greater purpose of us being here? Like, Christine, in your video, you had, people are just saying like, we just have fun. And that could actually be what a bigger purpose is, like creating lightness or like levity to all of our customers. That could actually be it, and companies could make that it. It can also be something, when we say the word cause or purpose, we often think about charity or like how we give back. And, thinking about things like, I just read a story recently about a restaurant that was creating through like they had like a fund to help bring immigrants into the restaurant, skill them up and help them get housing and help them get settled. And so the workers were all, aligned on this as a purpose, because most of the workers came from immigrant families or were immigrants themselves. So they felt this higher purpose just to help somebody else. So even that can be something, because it's really aligning people about helping somebody. And I know I'm somebody that feels too much, so I got goosebumps just thinking about that for this one restaurant that I read about in the news.
Right.
Yeah. What do you make with that?
Yeah, no, I think that's interesting. And I do think it's interesting to say it isn't always necessarily directly related to the job. And I too thought when the video talked about laughing, I love to laugh. And so I thought, yeah, that would be exactly the kind of atmosphere that would make me feel good. And it does offer meaning as well, right? And I do think it's interesting, because I did read somewhere recently that we've traditionally thought, we kind of had a transactional workforce where here, I'm going to pay you cash and you do X, Y, Z for me. And that's the end of our relationship. But we're away from that now, and we're not going to go back to that anymore. So the package exists, and we have to embrace it and figure out ways to make that happen within our business community. Because the reality is this workforce shortage is not just for 2022, right? They foresee it being this way for a long time to come.
Yeah, I think so we've got like, there's going to be a shortage, or more so, everybody wants to, this isn't a people are retiring. Some part of the population is retiring, but majority of people want to work. They need to work. They just aren't willing to work in ways that kind of threaten their entire sort of being. So they're working. I think us thinking more of it, they're not coming and knocking on our doors with all their resumes, because they're actually working right now. So because we have such a low unemployment rate, everybody is in a job. Are they in a job that meets all of their needs? Probably not. So are there opportunities for employers who are offering like the full package to woo them away? Absolutely. And you don't have to, it's actually not that hard to woo people away. So you should also think about that if you're an employer right now who's not offering a full enough package. Because people, when they are upset by any one of these things, I'll show this one. If any one of these things is out of whack, it's not actually like a pyramid or a stepped approach, although stepped approach is a good way of like building the blocks of things for your own company. If you're, somewhere in the basics right now and you're thinking, how am I going to level this up so I'm offering more? But really, a better way of thinking about it is to look at it like a wheel or a pie or a cookie, however you want to do it. But it's equal parts. And so I see this a lot. I give something to our career coaching clients. I'll give them a wheel that looks more like the wheel. And I'll ask them to rate their feelings about their current employment around these. So like on a scale of 1 to 10 for each of these dimensions. And wherever it's always a lopsided wheel, right? This wheel is not moving nicely. There's always something, it's always something different. And whatever that something different is, kind of hone in on and make it bigger. And it's kind of your opportunity as another employer to sort of come in and show that you could offer something more. And it's not always just offer more money.
Right. Is it less often money, or is money the top reason people might be looking for another job?
Money is the top. Well, there's 3 reasons that people will leave. Compensation is one, career development or lack of career development opportunities is two, and relationships with managers or like the internal communication in the workplace is number three. But if because I've also seen it where it's not always compensation. Compensation can be riding really high, and lots of companies will choose to pay a lot more because they know their culture is quite poor. So they'll try to get folks on the one dimension, and it lasts for some time, but doesn't last for always because so many people have been so much more reflective. It's like we've kind of had an awakening.
Right.
And so people are like, is it all about the money? So once we're in a stable place with our compensation, so basically once we're making that like lifestyle wage amount, that no longer is the issue. And you can't woo people away for, you know, sometimes you can for like double or triple, but like you usually can't woo people away if everything else is good and the compensation is decent. Usually it comes as a bit of a trifecta, you know?
Well, that's what I was going to say, because by the same token, obviously as a small business owner, there is a limit to compensation that a business can offer as well. And so, but if it's part of a bigger package and the other parts of the pyramid or of the circle are filled out as well, you're more likely to keep your employee.
You are more likely to. And again, sometimes you just won't be able to compete. Right? So like Christine, I love what you were saying about like the release. Like you're not going to be able to keep the student who was, you know, saving up for the car, who's going away to college. Maybe they'll come back during the summers and things, but it would be kind of ridiculous to think you're going to keep them for their career because you probably can't, you can't pay them enough to pay off the college, right? So they're going to move on. I think it's more like, are you finding the right people who match the type of compensation that you can afford to pay? And are you creating a total package that makes them go, this is okay, even if it's a little less than what I was hoping to do, because I'm actually getting other things. Like you asked me about the cause and we talked about belonging, but the other one in there is the career development. And if we think about like what kinds of skills, what kinds of professional development opportunities are you giving as part of your total employee experience, that can be a huge selling feature. I think about nonprofits. Nonprofits tend to have, you know, lower base salaries, lower wages, but they also have a lot of professional development opportunities, and they tend to have good employee benefits packages. And those are some of the reasons why people will go to a nonprofit and work there, because they're getting so much. And I work with nonprofits, so I see the ones that, you know, left the big corporate job, they've come in and they just love it. So like I get like, you know, a $5,000 stipend or what have you to work on my professional development. I can go to conferences, I can take classes. They're helping me with my master's degree. Like there's other ways that can be done, and I think that's true of smaller companies or like, you know, mom and pop kind of companies too.
Okay, so true or false?
Chris, just pay attention too, just in case I can't get it right, okay?
On average, people are moving into new jobs every 2 years?
That seems to be the case. I thought it was 18 months, but maybe 2 years is right.
And so employers are investing in new employees, but they're only staying for 2 years.
So I think the reason why, is that correct, that it is 2 years?
Apparently, yes.
Okay. So
according to Google.
Okay, according to Google. So I think one of the reasons is because, again, we're looking at this like we're offering the transactional job.
Yes.
We don't see that when we offer a fuller package, because if we're getting the career development piece right and people can see the career growth, I'm doing this because it tends to look a bit like a ladder, and there's a bit of it's not a game, but it kind of feels like a game for us. We're like, oh, the next level that I can achieve is this. And if I want to achieve that, my employer is helping me learn these skills so I can achieve that. That kind of changes the game. They might be moving out of that role and into a new role in a couple of years, but they'd be staying with the same employer. So you're, in a way, this is like investing in your future employees.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Christine made the comment as well that there was a time when you'd get, you know, dozens or maybe even hundreds of applications for a job, and now it's the opposite. There's maybe a few, and maybe the people don't have the skill set or the experience. how do you hire someone today with a limited amount of resumes in front of you? Is experience necessary? What kind of key indicators are you looking at when you're looking at hiring an employee?
I think you have to look inwards first at the company that you're managing or owning to see what can you actually offer. So it sounds like Christine's got a training program that allows her to hire people who don't have the relevant experience. And my guess, she learned that by realizing that people didn't have the relevant experience when they were applying. So the only next step is to build a training program and kind of do it yourself. I think more and more we have to do that, especially when it's going to be entry level roles. I think it's a little different if we're going to talk about managerial roles or or higher. We need to have a certain level of experience to achieve that. But when we're looking at we call them the individual contributor role. When we're looking at an individual contributor role, I think we have to be willing to do a lot of the training. And I don't know about all of you, but if you've ever hired somebody who's kind of coming fresh out of high school or university, they don't actually have the actual tangible working skills usually. Some people are smiling, unless they were working and building those up at the same time. So you might have to look at that as well. But I would say you're in some ways, you're lucky because you see what's coming into you. So you can kind of go back and look over these last couple of years when I've been trying to hire, what am I getting? Right? And if what I'm getting is underskilled, how can I solve that? And part of it might be solving a bit more of how you recruit and keeping a strong hiring funnel even when you don't need people. But the other part might be what do I need to train here because probably somebody else isn't doing this training for me.
I keep interrupting your slideshow, so keep going.
Yeah, so the rest of the slides are just I just wanted to give you ideas of what you could do and kind of action steps. Great.
So the question is, how do we reach people that are looking for a job?
Yeah.
Or are not.
We call them passive candidates.
Passive candidates.
Yeah. So sorry, I'll give you the HR talk. Call them passive candidates. So that's a great question because you are right. It has flipped, and almost everybody is now working. The thing is that I think this is true about all of you because some of you are on your phones. No judgment. I've got mine open too. Yeah. Is we are working, but we are not unless we are fully engaged because there is no way that you could woo me away from my awesome company. There are moments where we're all kind of looking to see what else is available. And so if we know that most people are passive, we can kind of gear towards them. So examples would be instead of job advertisements, in the classifieds or Craigslist or where we would used to go for those things, that will only find the active looking candidates. We can do things like make our kind of employee marketing materials more bold. So we've got to ask lots of questions who do we want to hire? Where are they hanging out? And actually tomorrow, just a plug for tomorrow, we'll talk a lot more about how to find them and how to sell them an opportunity. But it's really thinking where are they now? How can I speak to them in the environments that they're already in? I'm not suggesting you call their current employer. Although once I was on the receiving end of one of those calls and I was like, wow, that was really brave of that recruiter to call my employer asking for a software engineer but was sitting across from me. He is not available. Click. Wow. But good try. So where are they hanging out that's not their employer? How can you start to kind of softly start to build a relationship? So to Christine's point, this is not an effective strategy if you're expletive, my plumber has just left. No, not then. You have to think way further out so you can start building those relationships with potential candidates. And then when the timing is right for you, that allows you just to send them a quick message. Hey, I know that you're, fully engaged. I can see that by your LinkedIn or whatever, your social media. I'm just wondering though, is there any possibility? Because you've got a warm lead with them, because you've talked with them, they're likely going to entertain it. Because almost everybody entertains it. Would that be agree, everybody? Everyone's had a job at some point, right? And we all entertain it. I hope that helps. Yeah, Christine.
So just add a quick example. example. I went to a place and got amazing customer service. And I said, just so you know, I'm hiring and I'm looking for someone that has the same skills that you have. So rather than saying, I'm trying to hire you, but it made them go, really? And I said, so if you know anyone that's exactly like you, I'm hiring. You know,
Our workshop is turning into a conversation about how to poach employees from other places.
That is correct. And I've been hired away that exact way from somebody that came up when I worked in cosmetics. So yes, that strategy can work if your offering is solid enough, because everybody will entertain the question and they'll want to have the conversation. Yeah. So I've got up here compensation ideas. We've talked a little bit about this, about offering fair market value for compensation in or wages in your environment.
And how do they know? Like how does an employer know that they're offering fair compensation?
So you can do work towards understanding what that means. So there's my business partner is a compensation professional. There's people like that will compile all the data for you so that you know that you're offering something that's fair to your market. I'm just assuming that Campbell River has some kind of data source that could be helpul to do that.
Talk about that after.
Great. Okay, great. So we can talk to Chris about it as well. So doing your own homework. I would say not just relying on anecdotal evidence, like just because 3 people came in to apply for your job and they all told you how much they either want to make or what they made in their last role or whatever, doesn't mean that that's like great solid evidence. So I suggest using data instead. But more importantly is being transparent about the compensation and having like a real conversation about it in the hiring process. We get really cagey in these processes, or we're always asking the candidate what they want or like, what salary they have right now, so we can just give them a little top up to that or say, oh, it's out of our budget. But really, as the employer, it's kind of our responsibility to be the one that's like, okay, this is what this looks like. Here's the range. How do we feel about this? And engage them in this. Kind of shows that you're a trustworthy employer. So you're getting double points there. Having an employee benefits plan that addresses the core needs of your demographic. I'm sure Kelsey and Chris will talk maybe a little bit more about that. And again, sharing what you have in the recruitment process. There's no need to be cagey about this. You're trying to help people make a decision. It's kind of like when you go to an open house or something and the realtor's like, don't look in there. No, look everywhere. Let's be real about what we're getting. Okay? And then just a couple ideas to take action. So some interesting things I've seen in the last little bit, doing things like offering bonuses, like hiring bonuses up front. If it is about the compensation, offering something right up front can help make people make the move more easily. Offering a 2-week paid leave at the beginning. So we've got so many people who are burnt out now, who are like running away from one employer and jumping to the next one the next day because they're in that survivalist mode that we talked about. And giving them the break time that they need, honoring the person that they are and making it okay to take time off and paying them for that, that shows a lot about who you are as an employer.
On the note of time off, is that a big thing for people today, that they want more, that time is currency?
Yeah. So I think if you started to think, it's not just like paid time off, it's everything that comes within flexibility. So if we were to think, what can we do to redesign jobs for flexibility, we would address the unpaid and paid time off components of what people are really needing. So I recognize that we can't do that if we're in shift work where we actually need to be serving the tea. We cannot have like people working from home. But I would think that then we need to think, how do we accommodate different work schedules? How do we create like overlaps? How do we create paid time off that gives people what they need, or unpaid time off that helps them with all the things that they need? Awesome. But at the end of the day, like when we help people negotiate for roles, and again, I work mostly in the tech sector, but if we can't budge on compensation, the second negotiating factor is like, it's the top one on everyone's list. If I can't get more money, then I want time, right? And they're negotiating hard. Like I want the same amount that you have offered me, and I want to do it in 4 days.
Interesting.
Right? I love that because
Yeah.
you're just describing like what an employer could do. So our guest was saying, being offered or being asked what is your availability, and then having that kind of determine where the shifts are going to be. It's amazing to me how something as simple as that can really be a game changer if you can meet those candidates or those future employees of yours where they're at.
Right.
You can shift. You just might not want to make the shift because change is kind of hard, but it is a doable thing. And
Well, super interesting because, of course, the hospitality sector is one that's really needing people.
flexibility is key, and turns out it kind of has been all along.
Yeah, I was going to say it's nothing new.
Yeah. So, I've gotten here like I was talking more about psychological safety in here and how to take care of folks, but I feel like Kelsey's going to bring that home when she gets up here to talk.
How about an office dog? Would that be a good draw?
Ooh, all depends because people have allergies. So your standard poodle would probably be fine because I'm pretty sure they're hypoallergenic.
Yes,
but
yes, they are.
I think, again, that's, to me, actually in the inclusion and community kind of vibe. It's like understanding who your employees really are. Like, you really got to get to know people to know if having an office dog would be great or kind of like a buzzkill, right? But knowing that it's like you can use that to design so much about how you create inclusive behaviors. So if you were to start to think, you got to kind of skill up the leaders in the organization, like all the leaders, all the managers, so that they can model this type of inclusive behavior and so they can coach others. They're also the ones that need to be trained to listen really well to what employees and customers too are saying that they want, so that you can create that energizing environment at work, right? So Christine's figured out that like something about how they have fun is probably unique to how Stonehouse Teas has fun, and would probably be different than how how a on-site plumbing company would have fun. The fun is going to look different, but they're understanding how to make it fun with their folks. Okay.
So a dog maybe, but not always.
It all just depends. So I think one thing that we can do is you can do this quickly by starting to let people be part of the hiring process. Invite them in, invite peers and who's going to be direct reports and who's going to be on shifts together perhaps in on some of the hiring. One, you're teaching them core skills that they're going to need. Everybody needs to learn how to interview because it's just good human behavior skills. So like teaching people how to do that is great help, and it helps foster relationships from the get-go. And you were saying in your video there was somebody who said, my friend works here, right? And so what we're trying to do is, if we're not friends yet in the interview process, we want to help people build some bonds, okay? I'm just kind of skipping over these go further things, but I'm sure Leah can share some of these with the folks that are here and who was on the live stream.
Yeah.
And then we've got what we've been talking about how to do career development, how to achieve career satisfaction. And the idea here is actually be thoughtful about what kind of career opportunities there are available in your company. There's a lot of hype, lots of growth opportunities here. It's kind of like the selling feature on every job ad. Lots of flexibility. Turns out that's not quite true. Lots of career opportunities. Turns out we don't know what any of them are. And candidates are getting so much more discerning when they hear kind of that fluff. We really want to be able to be thoughtful and back it up. Even if it means that we're being thoughtful about the skills that they'll learn on the job, knowing full well that we'll release them and they'll use skills like this that will further help them, right? That, especially for entry-level roles, we don't know yet that we can use those, customer service skills and that we're gonna end up relying on them for the rest of our careers. We can make that a selling feature and actually, teach people how to say, like, I have 5 years of customer service excellence doing these things, right? We can do that for them as employers. If we've got maybe bigger organizations, we can really do a lot like structuring what the levels of work would look like in our organization. We can show them, instead of saying, I know this was great what you said about Kim, I think. You're already doing all the stuff as a manager, so let's make you one. you can reverse engineer that now and show what is the making of a manager here, and this is how you would become one, right? So we can really show that. And again, don't be shy about asking your candidates about their real career goals. Maybe try to stray away from the what's your 5-year plan, because a lot of people don't have that and get pretty frightened about that question. But asking them, like, what do you hope, what's exciting you about the job that we're talking about now? What do you hope that this job might lead you to? How can I help you get there? Being upfront with those things in the recruitment process can be highly helpful. And then we talked about cause, and I bet you we're kind of coming up on a time. I'm looking at a time check. But Rose, do you have a
Yeah, no, I actually think that still is an interesting one, and I've read quite a bit about employees wanting to work for a purpose, and I think that might be a challenge for employers as well to kind of consider what does that look like, and you did provide some suggestions beforehand as well, and it doesn't always have to be related to the employment, but other things around it as well.
Yeah, I have some questions on here because it's true. It's almost like either we don't have a purpose, so we need to create one, and it needs to be meaningful for us. So if that's where we are, that's the next step. Or we might actually have a purpose, but we don't communicate it in a way that candidates can really resonate with. So we're not quite talking those values that we have, or we're not quite talking about like what we care about. We might be using those words, but we're not actually describing it, because people want to hear what's specific to that organization so that they can make a decision if that's the kind of cause or care that they want to get involved in. We need to start doing things like aligning our hiring practices with that. So if we align our operating practices with like having fun, for example, then our recruitment process probably should be somewhat fun as well, to kind of demonstrate and see, does the candidate's version of fun match what our version of fun is, right?
Can that show up in a job posting? Like, can you?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think that's allowed. I think you have to back it up. Like written medium is great. We'll talk about job ads a bit tomorrow in the workshop. But if it's not backed up, like we're a place that has fun, and then you come into the job interview and everybody's like, you know, stone-faced instead of like Stonehouse tea-faced, like, you know, we feel it right away, right?
Yeah, it's true. You can't lie about that.
No, so I'd rather folks be like really honest in the job ads. Like I help coach people in job ads mostly for tech, and I mostly work in like high growth environments. I'm like, talk about the chaos. Just put it up there.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have systems built. Just write it, because what you're hiring for is building systems, right? Yeah. And then I wrote some questions here that, you know, asking yourself, challenge you all to ask these questions, like, what do you stand for? Or what do you support, right? And then how can we get others involved? Maybe as a management team, we actually don't have that, you know, ironed out yet. Well, how could we get the employees in on that? And maybe it's a group joint effort that comes up with what our cause is, instead of it being, you know, led from the top down. And that can be a really great way of building community and inclusion too.
Crystal, I really enjoyed this conversation. I really liked your line. I probably flubbed it up a bit, but creating an environment that energizes the employee and, of course, the employer as well, I think is a good goal.
From what you've heard so far, or what you'll hear upcoming, making a commitment to an action that you'll take, even just one thing, write yourself a note, schedule yourself some time to think about it. And maybe, you know, folks in the crowd, maybe recruit somebody that you could talk to about it, so that you have a friend, because it's easier to do it together. If all this is kind of overwhelming, because that was a lot, just start with one dimension and get one dimension strong, and then you can always work to the next ones. And yeah, don't go it alone. Involve other key members of your tribe.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Crystal.
You are welcome. Thanks for having me.
I know you're going to hang around so you can talk a bit afterwards. I'm going to invite Chris up now from North Island Employment Foundation.